All right, we're good. So we're
Okay.
on.
Yeah.
Lucy, thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
I begin with one question. But before I begin with that question, I think I want to give an explanation to the audience to understand, because you're the first guest of a new series that I'm beginning, and it's called Notable Armenians.
Okay.
So usually I interview comedians, and that's kind of been the foundation, but you are the beginning of a cool series that I think deserves to be highlighted, where I just want to talk to Armenians that are doing really cool, interesting things all over the world. And today we got lucky enough because you were in town doing a concert at our church.
Yes. I was.
And thank you for stopping by to have a chat. So the first question and the only question is, where were you born?
I was born in a small city called Armavir in Armenia.
Okay.
And then I lived there for about 11 years, and then my family moved to New Jersey.
How did that come about?
Um,
Because a small village
yeah.
and then New Jersey.
Yeah, I know, it's a big jump. Well, all through the 90s, you know, if anyone's familiar with the situation in Armenia, the 90s were pretty rough economically. And my dad was a wood carver who, for artists in the 90s, there was no work in Armenia. And so he was constantly going in and out of the country looking for work. And it just eventually got to a point where the only choice was to leave. They financially couldn't keep up. There's 4 of us. There's 4 kids, 4 daughters.
Where do you fall in the line?
I'm the third.
Okay.
I'm the third. And so my mom, I don't know how, made it over to Jersey and then worked for a couple of years and brought us all over afterward.
So mom came first.
Mom came first.
Did you have people here before?
No,
What was
no.
the
It was
kind
one of those
like,
rare cases of Armenians that no relatives, nobody in America. And my mom took a really big risk doing what she did. So.
Did she ever tell you how she ended up landing on Jersey as a place? Because like, when we immigrated in the early 90s, the spot was California.
LA. Yeah.
Because
there's an Armenian community.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, there's little Armenian.
I think
this
she
whole deal.
found a job. She was taking care of, she was like a caretaker. And I'm not sure exactly how she found that job.
Because this is in the 90s. There isn't like
Yes.
an Indeed for Armenian jobs in
I know.
New Jersey.
This was in 2001. And I really,
Still, you're talking
honestly,
about,
I
like-
don't know how she did it. I'm not exactly sure how she found that initial job. But you know, she's like a go-getter. She gets shit done. So she made it over and worked for a couple of years and then brought all 4 of us and my father over to Jersey. And even though in a lot of ways, you know, it was rough because there were no Armenians, especially the town we moved into had no immigration, not even, you know, like 4th, 5th generation Irish, Italian kind of vibe.
What city or what
It
town
was
were you
called
guys?
West Milford, which is a really beautiful place in northern Jersey. It's all woods, but there's nobody there. It's just as white as America gets, you know, and
Right.
0 immigration. So it was a strange place to go to, and initially, you know, I disliked it and wished we had moved into the city or something. But throughout the years, I've realized it was a very good first impression of what America is.
When you say the city, do you mean New York City, or
New
do you
York
mean
City.
parts of like Newark or other parts of Jersey that are
No,
kind of like
New
more
York City.
metropolitan?
New York City.
New York City.
Yeah, I mean,
course.
once you visit, you know, like I remember the first time she took us to the city, and it's funny, it's like Wizard of Oz, you know, the city
yeah.
is just all roads around there lead to New York, and that's all I wanted, so.
I think certain places almost have their own life force.
Yeah,
And New York City is one of those places for me. London is one of those places for
Yes.
me. Madrid is another city that
I've never been to Madrid.
it's one of those things where it's just the city, it takes on its own life, and if you allow it, it'll engulf you, and you'll just enjoy that experience. I know a lot of people would rather be in the suburbs where it's quiet, but
Yeah.
that drives me insane. I'd rather be in the middle of the city hearing the noise
I
because
see.
it makes me feel like
But
the
have you
heartbeat
lived-
of the world.
Have you lived in a city long term?
Yeah.
Where?
Well, I mean, Los Angeles. I mean, it's
Okay,
a long
but I
term.
don't know if LA is like spread out, and it doesn't have the same kind of like
I completely agree with you.
density that a place like New York does.
No. So if something to that extent, no.
Yeah.
I mean, the closest I would say is Yerevan, but again, nowhere near as dense,
Yeah.
but a lot smaller than New York
Yes.
City. So, no, but I
Yeah.
was
Well,
6
although
when I
Yerevan
came
has
here.
gotten very, very kind of cosmopolitan and insane, and so it is kind of this big megapolis now.
And I
But-
think it's still kind of trying to grow. It's just
Oh, yeah.
there's
I
so
mean,
much surrounding it that's not allowing it.
Yes, But I mean, like for anyone who's visited Yerevan recently, like just the construction alone is insane. It's insanity.
Yeah, we went through that Velvet Revolution, and everybody wanted to invest.
Yes, and it's great.
Hindsight,
but I do, you know, from people who are back there, I feel like, you know, the power grid can't keep up with the rate of
expansion and growth.
Yeah, it's
and I think they're looking into. I was reading about this, but I don't know if there's any truth to it, that they're looking into nuclear power stations in Armenia and you know, signing some sort of agreement. I don't know who it was
because
with.
the nuclear power plant is about to expire. I think
and
it's no longer operational. Yeah,
it's much older technology. I think it's like Soviet era. And
I grew up next to that. My town is next to that thing. So, you know, those 3 towers were looming, or whatever chimneys or whatever you call them.
They're the exhausts, actually. That's all most people think that what's coming out of those things is chimney or something. It's just water vapor. Yeah, because it's the amount of heat that is generated by one of these, you know, humongous mega structures that generates electricity, which is beautiful, but frightening if you're next to it.
Frightening, and it was one of those views. You know, you had Mount Ararat on one side, and then you turn around and these 3 giant things are just, and I mean, I don't like the thought that it's about to expire. So
and Chernobyl was
stop operating.
And Chernobyl was not that distant of a memory, where everyone in the Soviet Union kind of remembers that, and we were part of that union for many, many years, and we remember like, well, it could happen.
There's a lack of trust in, you know, communist-made,
especially early '90s when you know everything's just going really downhill. And I mean, I was 5 when I came here, but I also remember, you know, candlelight nights when nobody had power. 1991 is when I came to this country.
So the year I was born.
Yeah, November 1991 is when I came to the United States, and I was 5, and I genuinely remember my mom, under candlelight, reading Komitas to us, because for some reason I grabbed that book off the shelf.
Okay.
And we lived in Yerevan, the capital city, but nobody had power. It was just all blackouts because the Soviet Union was going to hell. So you were born right in the midst of it.
I was born that year, and then the next 10 years were that.
Well, gee, I wonder why you're a resilient person, or your mom was a resilient person.
She was. She was definitely she's definitely a tough cookie. But, you know, I was actually just talking to your wife about how I had one of the sweetest, most wonderful childhoods. Because all the things that seem necessary to us in the first world, when it comes to kids, it's completely unnecessary in a lot of ways. Because I grew up next to a stove with no water, no heat, I had none of the amenities that people think are absolutely necessary.
Essential.
Mind you, you know, it was hell for my mother in a lot of ways. It's a lot of work, but there was a certain...
I mean, women of that era were tough women.
Yes,
they had to be because there's so much going on. Men were gone for months at a time on job sites.
Yeah.
It was very common for, you know, men to just get on a bus and leave for some part of Russia to work.
Oh yeah. I mean, there was Armenians had a rough, I mean, last couple 100 years, I would say, but it's been an interesting history, like slightly pre-Soviet and then post-Soviet Armenia, because of the first Artsakh war, you had a generation of kids growing up who were fatherless because the father died in the war, and then you had a couple other generations that were fatherless because the father had to leave the country to work. So essentially, your home life was without a male. You know, I grew up kind of without my father.
Yeah, and I have a lot of friends, especially the ones in LA, that immigrated here at a later stage in their life, so like 20s and above.
Right.
They all have similar stories of parents just, what we call here latchkey kids, where you had a key to your apartment because nobody was home.
Yep.
For them was normal, but it was also, you would come home to a freezing home because there's no heat, and you have to figure out how to heat the house, and you're 9.
Yes. I mean, I remember,
So like my friends have some of the most terrifying stories, but they are also the people in this country that seem to be the most grateful, seem to be the most patriotic, seem to be the most, feel the most blessed that their children have never known what that feels like, and probably will never know, God willing. And I love that about us immigrants, where we come and we actually appreciate what is, I know you say like, taken for granted, but none of my friends that immigrated to this country take for granted the liberties that they have here.
and the necessities and whatever else,
Yeah, I
whatever
mean,
other
and
comforts you have.
And you said it, everything is bigger in Texas. I understand it. It is a state that does allow for things to be just on these grandiose scales.
Because it's just massive.
Right,
it's a massive area.
And that's great, and that's a beacon of hope for so many people that all over the world. They're like, maybe I can get a plot of land in Texas somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, there's still a frontier. There's still hope. That whole thing.
For sure.
And I don't know. I hope that.
I agree with you, and I do think that is the disposition of most people who grew up in the 90s, most Armenians who grew up in the 90s. And I am very much appreciative, and I was just telling my husband, like, of all the things that I've become accustomed to, turning on the water and the water being hot, to this day, I'm like, thank you, Lord. Like, there's hot water in the tap, But all of that being said, I also live in a city and I work in a field where I find myself in places where I'm rubbing shoulders with the 1% of the world. And places like New York City, where you're running into the wealthiest people in the world who live a luxurious life that is like beyond your wildest imaginations. And because I'm a musician who ends up like playing house parties or just some random event for some billionaires or some corporation, I end up being very close to these people, and it leaves you oftentimes with a feeling of, I don't have enough, because you're constantly faced with a level of luxury that is like unprecedented. And so it's difficult to hang on to that feeling of gratitude and like, I have enough, because New York City is constantly in your face like, no, you don't. The guy next door has got more than you.
But have you ever asked yourself the question, do you want it? Because that's the more
you can't
important
help it.
thing. Because I have a feeling that a lot of these billionaires never wanted it and don't know what to do with it and are just stuck in.
Of course, listen.
A lot of them are happy. I'm not saying that all billionaires are miserable.
I was actually going to say 90% of the people I talk to in places like that are miserable. It doesn't matter. Human nature is that you're kind of always discontent on a certain level and you want more. Gluttony and kind of...
But isn't that also what kind of fuels and drives innovation and creativity and that hunger for, as an artist, it's never enough, it's never good enough. Isn't that part of that?
Yes, but like to an extent. Yes, but I don't agree with the like capitalist approach to more and more. We're speaking about Armenia. There used to be a Soviet cartoon that I really liked. It was about this Indian sultan who is chasing this deer who every time he kicks his hind legs, he makes gold coins. I don't know. Do you remember this? Have you ever seen this cartoon?
I have not seen that one. No.
And anyway, he
was this like 90s and up?
This was like probably a cartoon from the late 70s, but they always played it.
Because I got like Vinny-Pooh, Nubakadze, and like a bunch of other things like that. But like this one like, maybe missed me. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway,
and then I came to America and I was like,
this
oh,
big
cool.
hunt, and they find the deer, and they bring the deer to the palace, and the sultan's like, more, and the deer's running around, and there's just more gold, and eventually he dies under the pile of gold. Sure, it's
a wonderful metaphor.
The need to have more can lead to innovation, but only to a certain extent. I don't believe in the capitalist idea of like limitless more. I think that's why America, all the bad negative things I see in America are because that's been taken to a level that's unnatural and immoral.
I agree. So, and to that effect, your city had an event that kind of has broken this country to an
9/11.
extent. No.
Oh, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about way more recent. The CEO that got shot.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have an entire cohort of people, and it's a very large amount of people that are praising this gentleman as a hero.
I saw that. I've been seeing that.
And then you have a bunch of other people that are saying that he's a villain. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, when are we going to start talking about how I don't care if he is a villain or isn't, you don't get to shoot a person in the street.
Yeah.
I understand you may have gripes with the healthcare system, and God knows it's not perfect in any way, shape, or form, and many people have been wronged by it. But
that's not the solution.
This is not what this country is about. Chaos is not. I know due process may take a long time, but it's frightening when sensibility is lost, where we praise a hero
Yes.
that is not a hero.
Yes,
A hero,
we're in a strange place.
a hero is
in
the person
America.
that runs into that building wearing a badge
Yeah.
to save a child
Right.
who never anybody hears about. That's
Right.
a hero because
Right.
they don't do it for the publicity or the notoriety or, no, you're just doing civil
Yeah.
disobedience by murdering someone.
Yes.
And, you know, his children didn't deserve that. As
Yeah.
bad as a guy he is, they are not. And
Yeah.
that, it always comes back to me on that. Is just like, I understand he may be a horrible human being as a businessman,
Yes.
but at the end of the day, his kids probably loved him.
Of course. And aggression and violence is never the answer.
There's a place for it.
But, and I hate to say but here, but
Here we go.
I do think it's an indication of how fed up people are. There is a real problem in this country. Like, the haves and the have-nots, or that gap has become, and again, this is going back to, you know, me living in a city where, you know, I see some horrible shit on my block. I live in Harlem. You know, that can be an extremely sad neighborhood.
Yeah, it's,
And it
I mean,
shouldn't be. And then I go downtown and I'm fucking seeing some of the most insane shit I've ever seen. It's absurd. It's absurd, the level of
you know when
poverty versus the level of luxury and wealth.
you know how they show sometimes the favelas in Brazil versus the opulence?
Yes. Yes.
All you're doing is showing that just to hide the fact that you have it right here in your own backyard.
Yes.
Take out about, I don't know, 10 states. The other 40 are really, really struggling. I'm not even
Yeah.
doing citywide. If I go city by city, then the majority of this country has a ton of problems going on.
Yeah.
And we sit in these ivory towers and pretend like it's not going on because it's not on our social media feed. But there's enough people hungry in this country that we shouldn't think that we are so goddamn great until we
Absolutely.
take care of it because we can afford it.
Absolutely.
Oh man, we can afford to take care of every single hungry child in this country and then some.
So,
I'm sure we can. You know why I know we can do it? Because numbers are just a fabrication at this point. You can just print it, for God's sake.
true,
You do it for everything else.
right.
Seriously, you do it for everything else.
Right.
Do it for this. Find a way to make money off of it. I don't care if you capitalists need to make money off of feeding kids. Make your goddamn money, but feed the kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I'm okay with that. I understand I'm shaking the hands with the devil, but I'd rather shake hands with the devil knowing the kids aren't hungry because I'll take that sin on myself. It's not their burden, it's mine. I'm
yeah.
okay with that.
Yeah. Well,
And that's what all American adults should come to terms with at some point. It's like, we need to take on some sins by shaking the hand of the devil to make sure that the future generations don't have to shake that goddamn hand. Immigrants understand this inherently. All immigrants understand this.
We're getting into, you know, something that's kind of more complicated than anything we could discuss on a fucking podcast.
You
But-
have no idea what we've discussed on this podcast in the past.
I'm
All
sure.
world problems
I
have been
just
solved
I
10
see.
times over. All we needed
I
was just
lit-
like a backgammon board and 14 old men at a park, and we have solved all
too.
nations' problems.
That's true too. But I.
But let's get back to
Okay.
more focused on what
I
we
was
really
just gonna
were
say
talking
that
about. You
most-
talked about.
Almost any issue you deal with, it's just not as black and white as we all think it is. You know. Like
Is
that.
anything though?
No, nothing.
I wish
That's what I'm
anything
saying.
in life
That's
was.
what I'm saying. Nothing is as black and white, and so there's no black and white solution to any problem we might discuss. You know what I
No.
mean? So.
I think very,
Anyway.
but I think the discussions are the important part. At least
Yeah, of
we need
course.
to get back to a place where we can talk
Of course.
and allow even the stupidest ideas to flow freely so we can call it out and make better ones.
For sure. But you were saying, sorry, get back to what?
I was trying to get back to, you touched on it a little bit, Jersey and then
Yeah.
Harlem. So
Yeah.
how does that, give me a kind of like, let's go through that a little bit because I want to get to you as a musician, but I really think it's important to kind of like get the background. So we went from Armenia to Jersey and you
Yeah.
were about 11 or 12 when you get there.
Yeah, 11 or 12 when I got to Jersey, when we got to Jersey.
And you're in this like small town, right?
Small town. We stayed there. I graduated high school there. And then right after I graduated, I went back to Armenia.
To live
'Cause I
there.
just not to live there, but I stayed for about a year.
So it was like a year before college kind of a thing that a lot of
Yes.
people do a year
Or
abroad.
was it after college? No, it was after high school, if I'm not mistaken. But I wanted to see Artsakh.
Okay.
And so I went and I taught there at this Narikatsi Arvesti Kentron in Shushi. I taught there for about 6 or 7 months, and it was really...
So this was like a musical center?
It's like an art center. They did all sorts of stuff. Because I'd met the owner, the guy who built the foundation, here in the States, and he wanted me to like go and serve as director there, but it was like too much. You know, I was just a kid out of college or whatever. It was not the right time for it, but...
What was his thing about the foundation? What was kind of like? Did he tell you why he did it?
You know, there were not enough. There was not enough Armenian investment in Artsakh, whether it was cultural or economic, or and it was the government. I don't think ever did enough, so it was up to individuals to kind of build that there. And he was one of the guys that really, really cared about education for kids, I think, mostly. And so it was a school for kids. And it was great. I had a great time, but anyway, I couldn't stay on with the position that he wanted me to. I was too young, I was just messing around.
How long were you there? How much
I was
time
there
did
for
you
about 6 or 7 months.
Okay.
And then I went back home to Armenia. And then afterward, when I got back, because I'd been singing jazz the whole time, the only natural path is to go to New York for jazz today. Like somebody tonight was like, "Oh, are you guys singing New Orleans jazz? Because that's real jazz." I'm like, that was like, New Orleans was arguably the center. Yeah, and I was like, no, we sing New York jazz, and arguably, New Orleans was the center for the music when like Louis Armstrong was coming up, but it no longer is. New York has been the epicenter for jazz for the last, I don't know, fucking 80 years or something. So it doesn't matter whether you're in Japan, Armenia, or Jersey, you're going to New York. Like, if you want to get your ass handed to you and learn how to do this correctly, you go to New York. So that's what I did. And
so this is post-college, after the Armenia and Artsakh.
Yeah. And
Where'd you go to college?
I went to college at William Patterson, which is a good jazz school in Jersey. But small university, nothing crazy.
When was the first time you actually kind of like saw yourself as a musician, or even thought that you had the inclination? Because it's one of those things that like you either have it or you don't.
Yeah.
You can sing or you can't, or you can play or you can't, or something like that.
Well, you need to have a little bit, but a lot of people have a little bit of that talent. But unless you actually put in the work, it's...
No, I know, but I mean, as much as I try for the rest of my life, as much work I put in, I will still sound like I'm scratching a chalkboard. But I've come to terms with this idea.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I understand there's been immense amount of work, and I want to talk about that. And I just want to know when it started, because I feel like for an artist, it becomes somewhere, young. Right?
My mom was really adamant about us performing and being on stage at a really young age, because I think she figured out like, oh, this isn't normal for kids to have a good ear like this and be able to sing like this.
Were all four of you talented as far as
all
like
four
musical
of us sang
arts
well.
or arts in a way?
Yes, all in arts, all in music, except my youngest sister who went into hotel management. She was like, yeah, you guys aren't making enough money. I don't need to do that. So she went into the
she
service
took the practical
industry.
route.
She is, and she was actually, she kind of manages me now. So she's the one, selling the merch at the concerts.
Nice.
She knows what she's doing, yeah.
Very good.
But everyone else is in the arts, and we did it as early as I can remember. I myself never necessarily wanted to go into it. I still kind of don't.
Sure.
I don't, because
you're traveling
I am
all over.
I am.
You just came out with a CD
I know that's horrible to say
album,
that.
But
But I'm giving you the reality, which is that I really, truly, immensely enjoy singing, but I don't like a lot of things that surround my work.
Okay.
Because I'm kind of a loner. I'd like to be left alone. I can socialize if need be, but I'm not one to go out and mingle, and I'm just and I have to do so much of that as a part of my job that it exhausts me. So I don't like that part, and I don't like to travel, and I have to do that constantly. This is sounding terrible, but if
hotel management doesn't sound bad right about now.
That's true.
It's steady. You just take a train to a spot and then a train back.
Maybe I made a mistake, man. I don't know.
No, of course not.
Because I really, truly love singing, and so I have to take the shit that comes with it, because every job has that. You were saying, you're also in a field that's not enlightening to you, but you do it because that's what you do. And
right.
I do something where there's an element of it that I truly love and enjoy, and I have to, you have to take whatever comes with it.
So what is the love and enjoy? What is that element? What is it that
the
keeps you in
singing.
it?
It's like, you know, creating that moment with an audience where you can kind of like bring everyone together and make the audience, for a moment, forget their daily cares and forget what differences they might have with the person sitting next to them, and for a moment just like create just this little short little moment, just a moment where you share this pure, happy, not necessarily happy, but a pure and an honest moment with a group of complete strangers. And that's the funnest thing about my job, because you can't really do that with any other job, really. You can't take a bunch of strangers and suddenly make them feel like they all know each other and they're all at peace with each other. And I can do that, and I enjoy that.
The only other genre outside of the arts I could think of would be a shaman.
Or something like that, yeah.
Or you know, something like
yeah, like
that,
some
or a
priestess
yogi or someone
yeah,
like that.
whatever, yeah.
Yeah, but it's akin to like a spiritual
Yes.
moment, and I feel that about music. I've always wondered that about music. Why does it even exist? It's one of the,
I mean, that's
I
a very
can
good
understand.
question. I can tell you, really.
I
but-
understand why like paintings exist, because before we were able to speak and write, we had to convey messages somehow, and we rudimentary drew things on walls, and that kind of kept going and maybe evolved with us. But I never understood music, and it's one of those things that's
It's
so
interesting
fascinating.
that you've kind of come up with a solution for visual art, but to me,
It's rudimentary. I
to
mean,
me,
it's based in
singing
nothing.
in particular, music, but singing in particular is the original art form, because if you think of a woman giving birth and then having to hush that baby, that's the beginning of singing.
Oh.
You know, like, and
The humming and
the humming and what any kind of noise you're making. I mean, before anyone was scribbling on a cave wall, people were like making noise to make each other understand whatever, you know. So to
you
me,
think
that's the
noise
beginning.
predates the wall art.
Music and yeah, absolutely.
See, I look at it a
you
different
have
way.
to
I
go
feel
back
like
to
we
the
were
origin.
mute.
It's like, here's this crying baby. What the fuck are you gonna do to make it stop? You're gonna hum or sing something.
But that's taking the understanding that, well, it's taking the assumption that our senses evolved at the same rate, meaning eyes, ears, vocal ability, all of the senses. I don't. And again, this is just like a random theory I have versus a theory that you have.
Interesting,
And
actually,
my
because
theory
if you
says
watch, you're actually you might be right.
well, I say eyes evolved first, hearing evolved second, but this evolved later because we needed this and this to understand and see danger. We needed this to get away from it somehow or protect. This came maybe a little bit later in my thought process of like how it worked, but could have just come at the same time. We're
I don't know. You'd have to talk to an evolutionary scientist to know.
Yeah, like,
but
I
like
would need
if
to
you
talk to
watch
Brett Weinstein or
videos,
somebody.
like I love watching nature videos. If you watch videos of like apes and stuff, I mean,
Have you watched Chimp Empire on Netflix?
No.
Oh, please do
Oh,
yourself
my
a
husband's a
favor
big
and
fan of
watch
chimps. Okay.
Chimp Empire.
Okay, I'll check it out.
It's a series. It took these wildlife biologists about 30 years to kind of like get comfortable with them. It is the most fascinating thing you'll ever see.
Yeah, because that stuff really kind of gets, when you observe animals at that stage, yeah, like they'll like crack a nut open, but yeah, they're not singing, but they're like making noise and stuff, which is, you know, the origin of something like singing. But I don't know, I'd actually be curious to know. I guess there's no way to know when humming or singing started really versus cave paintings. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, okay? But the way I've thought about singing and music is that, to me, and I always say that women make better singers because we were the original singers, because a mother has to hush the baby.
And there's so few of you now. Really
There's so what?
So few women singers.
What do you mean? In jazz, they're like 99% it's all women.
Take the musical genre in total. You guys are the least represented as far as vocalists. You don't have as many women on a microphone as you have men.
Is that true?
True.
Like
Take
what,
all
in the
rock
pop
bands,
world?
Look at it this way.
Okay,
take all
rock.
the rock bands, pop bands. You
Wait,
take
pop.
all the
Wait, pop.
Go for it. Take your time with it.
I don't know. I'm not too familiar with like top 40, so I don't
Neither
know.
am I, but if you look at it like on a historical context.
Yeah. Well, there's been less women in the arts overall, for sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about like recent history. I don't know if.
Anytime I close my eyes and can think of
a singer, you think of a man?
Opera, no. Opera automatically goes to a woman.
Okay.
If I'm thinking about something that...
Jazz goes to a woman. Come on, man.
So vocal jazz for me always goes to a woman that has a raspy voice.
Yeah, like Billie Holiday or
something like that. Yeah. For rock music and things like that.
Yeah, it's all dudes. That's true. There's certain genres that are dominated by men.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's mainly, a male-dominated genre for the longest time.
Yeah.
And I still think it is.
You might be right. Then I'm
Fleetwood
speaking
Mac is one of my
strictly
favorite bands of all time.
Okay.
And I mean, it's not for nothing, but the female vocalist makes that band why I love it so damn much.
I mean, obviously, this is like a joke I'll make on the mic, like men can't sing. There's some satire in what I'm saying. I don't think it's entirely true. But if I'm speaking strictly about the jazz world, that is actually the only position in the band that's been predominantly dominated by women, while the rest of the band is all dudes.
I don't really see many women trumpetists.
Yeah,
or,
no.
a
It's
bass
changing
guitarist
slowly,
or
but
something.
it's incomparable. But it's all been, like the holy trinity is Sarah, Ella, and Billy, and that's just...
Well, I think
and no one can compete with that. Even like Frank Sinatra, Joe Williams, okay, but not really.
No, I don't look at it. Yeah, because if you think about it, complementary to the actual melody in jazz, I think a female vocalist is much more complimentary than a male vocalist. My opinion. But
I think so too.
But I think the reason I think that is because
not to boast about myself.
I think I'm gonna get roasted for what I'm about to say, but for me, jazz can be harsh at times, and I feel like the female vocalist brings that break in the harshness that I want. Because
are you talking about like contemporary jazz music?
I think jazz music in general for me is not one of my favorite genres. I appreciate it for its complexity. No, it is, because my next week my aunt and her husband are flying in, and his literal nickname is Jazz. His name is Armen Jazz, because he is. I mean, like the vinyl you brought me today. He has hundreds of them, and he has thousands of jazz CDs,
obsessive fans. Okay,
and he goes to Monterey every year.
Obsessive jazz fans.
Oh my God,
yes.
yes.
But as far as like
he
a portion of the population, nobody listens to jazz. Like if you're looking to make money, you can, but
look,
it's probably one of the least popular genres of music today. So
I rummaged through his CD case one time, and I found, the quintessential essentials of like, there was the Beatles, there was Pink Floyd, there was Led Zeppelin, ABBA, and a few others just like mixed into the array. But everything else was names that I was not familiar with, because probably nobody was familiar with it, because he's on the level of enjoying jazz music like some of my friends who enjoy very fine wines, where they are really searching for it, and they are like, you understand, this grape came out of this soil that was facing southeast during the lunar eclipse of 42 or whatever it is, and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
And what is that doing for me right now?
Yeah, that's your stereotypical jazz fan. Yeah, they're obsessive. They're crazy.
Yeah.
But, they keep me working, so I like that.
But I feel like they should be, because it's the type of genre of music where you stumble onto it, either you love it or you hate it. It's not casual listening music, like
I don't agree with that entirely.
Really? Okay.
No, I think I think that's a misconception about jazz, and I think generally jazz has been misrepresented for years and years, and that's why it is where it is.
So tell me more on that. What do you think has been the misrepresentation of jazz? Because I just misrepresented it because that's the opinion that I bought into, just kind of based on like maybe a stereotype of it.
It's either like put on a pedestal as sort of a museum piece, and people are almost like afraid of it. It's like, this is very serious music, and the fact that you don't like it just means it's too complicated for you and you don't understand. And that's a fucking stupid way to advertise. But a lot of people, because
you can't discriminate in the arts.
Funding for jazz has been tied to like sort of the financial aristocracy in this country for so long. There's like a snobbiness attached to jazz that is
it like classical
that has been
music?
Hurtful. Yes, it's a lot like classical. It's treated as if it's classical music, but that's ridiculous to me, because it's the people's music. It's like actually the only since we're talking about this in the context of being Armenian, like հայկական ժող երաժշտությունը իմ համար հավասար է jazz երաժշտության, որովհետև
So our
jazz
folk
music
music.
is the people's music. I'm sorry, like America isn't great on culture, okay? But America has created one of the most globally loved genres of music, which is jazz music. It's just been presented in this very like
Can I say one
snobby
thing, though?
way that is not digestible.
When we say America's not great on culture,
Yeah.
do we ever take any time to consider that it hasn't had any time? It's 300 years old. It's a baby compared to Armenia.
Sure,
as far as
that's
oldness.
fine. But
We
I'm
go back
saying
to the
within that time, it
Babylonians.
has created this fantastic
Oh,
genre
yeah.
of music that is, you know, there's a reason there's a global love for this music. It is there's something universal and
Do you think that's-
humanitarian about it, and there's something you don't need to understand the language. I mean, you could arguably say that about rock, but it doesn't have the same weight as jazz music. Anyway,
Well,
point
I
being,
mean, so
I
to that
think the
to that
PR for
effect, what do
jazz
you
has
mean by
been shit,
not
which
the
is why
same-
nobody listens to it.
Yeah, well, I think
Because it is like
Well, I
I
think
can
it's-
guarantee you, I could put on a certain kind of a record, and you could like it would create a great atmosphere for you to like cook in the kitchen. There's
Yeah.
like some awesome records so it is listenable and casual if you need it to be, but it can also be extremely deep and emotional. Like it doesn't have to be one thing. It's a plethora of things.
I think
you
a
know?
lot of music does have that ability. Even rock music in itself
Mm-hmm.
has just like, fun stuff,
Yeah.
but then it has also very deep, moving, just
for sure.
the outpouring of someone's emotion and the explanation of something beautiful or tragic that has happened. And you connect to it and you work through something.
Right.
And I've had the same experience with rap music. I think whatever and however art connects to your emotion, that was meant for that. And the one thing I've never been a fan of is how sometimes people feel the superiority and want to discriminate and say, just like you said, those are assholes that will say, oh, you don't like jazz, it's too complex for
Right.
you. Great, yeah, it may be too complex for me and I may not like it for that specific reason, but it doesn't give you the right to say anything to me.
No,
Just because
absolutely
I don't
not.
understand the complexity of it doesn't make me any less of a fan of art.
Oh, yeah,
in
yeah, of
general.
course,
You know what I
of
mean?
course,
And
I agree.
you could say the same thing about someone that says, "Oh, wait, you're not a fan of Pink Floyd, and you don't understand the complexity of Another Brick in the Wall Part 2." And I'm like, yeah, I get the complexity of it, but if someone else doesn't, I would never shame them for that.
Yes, but I think that's a
How
common
sad of a
trend
life you
within the
have.
classical and the jazz world. So
I think so too. Yeah, I've gotten that from people that are like, "Oh, you're not a fan of this." And you're
Yes.
like, yeah, I don't have to like all
Yeah.
classical music. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry
yeah.
that this
and
one
you
didn't
know,
speak
classical
to me.
music obviously longer than jazz. Classical music at one point was also the people's music. I mean,
course.
like,
But it was the people, and it was the people's music because maybe at a certain time you got a radio, and whatever was broadcast out,
that was that.
that was that. You were gonna.
I mean,
probably
I'm even
get-
talking before, I'm talking long before any kind of technology that would have transmitted music. Like,
Even
I
the-
remember reading an account of like the crowds in Vienna that used to gather outside the opera houses, and they'd be listening to what was going on inside, and the people on the street would be like singing along. That's what everyone was singing because that was the only fucking music there was around. So at one point it was the people's music, but slowly, like I said, I think because of reasons tied to funding for the arts, it's become a snobbish kind of business. So
And it's weird
you know.
that like, how come the internet didn't give rise to the freedom that a lot of other musical genres have found? There's so many artists that are independent, don't need labels, and are just touring and making ungodly amounts of money being great. I wonder why jazz didn't get that kind of infusion.
I mean,
I understand why classical may not,
there's
but why
some
not jazz?
musicians now that like there's this kind of contentious character, Laufey. I don't even know how you say her word. Laufey, and she sort of like sings kind of like vanilla jazz, I guess. I wouldn't call it jazz, but a lot of people have been calling it jazz.
What does vanilla jazz mean?
It's very like
jazz
kind
for
of
the
watered
masses?
down. It's like watered down and very relatable in a way that is a little corny to me, but
Doesn't that ruin jazz?
think so.
I thought they were telling me it was supposed to be complex.
But for the average person, that's jazz, and that's fine.
Okay.
So, but if you're talking about like popularity wise, like she's got a massive following, you know, like
Really?
yeah, I mean not like on a Taylor Swift kind of scale, but like massive following for like, you know, some like little girly chick just like playing her cello and singing her little songs. So the internet has enabled some people to make a career and make mad money out of it.
Okay.
Playing stuff that's adjacent to jazz, maybe not exactly jazz, but
So jazz in the
something
classical sense has not flourished, but it could be kind of going through the same renaissance. Let's say a lot of people are thinking of rap music as going, where
Yeah.
like the mumble rap crowd
Yeah.
has kind of like taken over, and
yes,
all of us sitting from a bygone generation are going like, you're not rapping. This
Right.
is not music.
Right.
Please stop.
Yeah.
This hurts.
right.
And then everybody that's younger than us is going like, but this is the craziest thing ever.
Right,
I'm
right,
like,
right.
He's not saying anything. Stop it.
Yes.
There's no words.
Yes,
Please.
yes,
Like,
yes.
gold. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
it's-
maybe we need, and I think we are a country of overcorrections.
Yeah,
And
for
I
sure.
think right now we
like
maybe
just go
just
completely
swinging
in the opposite.
Yeah, maybe we're just
For
swinging
sure.
into the realm of dumb. And I don't care if you're
Yes.
offended by it, but yeah, what you're listening to, a lot of it is just dumb.
Yeah.
And
for
I think
sure.
maybe
But you know what,
sensibility will
though?
come back.
I agree with you, and I certainly hope sensibility will come back. But as we were talking, I remembered that a friend of mine, Samara Joy, who's a very successful jazz singer, who sings like straight ahead jazz, sings the same shit I sing. She won 2 or 3 Grammys last year, but she won Best New Artist. Like,
Wow.
that's huge. That hasn't happened for a jazz musician in like God knows how long. So as far as like, can you monetize it? Is it popular enough? Like, hell yeah, that girl just became the best new art, won the Grammy for Best New Artist. And you've never heard of her. But there's enough of a
haven't,
following.
But I'll
There's
give
enough
you a
of
reason
following.
why. The same reason I haven't heard about a lot of pop musicians. Again, jazz's music I appreciate because it exists in the arts and I appreciate the arts. But is it something that I go to? Is it just a no?
Yeah.
For me, like, I don't know how to explain it. I love all
No,
different
that's
types of
fine.
genres
It's not
of music.
what comes on when you turn the radio on. You're not going to hear it. It's all good.
Also, I'm kind of been going through this stage in my life where music is a tool that I go to when I need to work through something, and otherwise it has kind of become a sacred thing that I don't touch. It's one of these weird things that just came about a couple of years ago for me, and I understood how deeply connected I am to music in general. So when I really need to work through something, I just kind of like headphones on, world goes away, and I'm in it.
Yeah.
And it really helps. And it's just anything you could think of, I will listen to. Like old Armenian folk music, I will go to. Heavy metal, crazy German rock stuff, whatever comes up to mind. But like pop and jazz just never hit that emotion
And that's
for
fine.
me for some reason.
That's fine.
And I think that's okay.
It's not for everyone. In the
It's
same
not-
way that I probably couldn't listen to metal, or, I mean, I might if I'm in the mood, but
But it's not top of your list, right? And maybe jazz isn't what you always
no, and I
revert
don't
to.
really listen to music anymore either. It's been many years because I'm exhausted after a concert, and the absolute last thing I want to do is listen to music. So the
That's
more you work,
interesting.
the less you want to. Yeah, because like people are always like, oh, let me take you to this place. I know it's a sick place. They've got great music. I'm like, no, take me somewhere where there's no music.
It's like the person that works in the chocolate factory never wants to eat a chocolate.
Yes.
I could completely understand.
Yeah, but I
mean,
think people don't realize that when it's about music, because it's such a popular way to pass your time and people enjoy like, oh, it's music, let's go out. It's like, no, that's exactly what I want to avoid. So
Have you ever met one of these people that has zero interest in music? Like couldn't tell you their favorite song or their favorite band?
yes, they're bland people.
They scare the shit out of me.
They're
They
scary.
terrify me.
They're scary. There's something off.
Because it almost feels like a primal urge, music.
And if you don't have it,
Trees, literally trees will, convey emotion in the way they grow faster or slower depending on the type of melody.
heard
This
that.
is a proven fact.
I've heard that.
And all of these different things that are like unexplainable, where it's like on a subconscious level, we are so deeply connected to it, and you meet someone, you're like, are you sure you're not a sociopath?
Yeah.
Like, what happened, man?
It's
you need a
definitely
hug?
disturbing. But
Like, I can understand
try
if you
not
don't
to
care about
judge too hard
paintings.
because I try not to judge too hard because there's so many things math. I am not interested in math.
Welcome to my club.
I'm
I can't
not
do 2
interested
+
in
2.
chemistry.
No, I get it.
I don't want to judge,
But it's not
I do
a
find it
primal
odd.
thing. It's not a primal thing. Basic understanding of mathematics, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
But to make a conscious decision to actually go into sciences, it's not a primal thing. It's something that you really have to make
It's
a
like
conscious
an intellectual
decision
decision.
about. Right. Whereas tapping your foot as a baby to music is not
just a
intellect. All of us as babies did this.
I guess you're right.
You have kids, I have kids, we all have seen this where
Yes.
some sort of something is playing in the background and your kid is just dancing
help it.
randomly.
Yeah, I wonder what those people did as babies. That's true. I've never really thought about it
They
like that.
just
But
sat in-
don't tell me this. Next time I meet someone who's not into music, I'll be
They were
freaked out,
4 years
but-
old sitting in a dark corner reading Dante's Inferno going, you're wasting your lives.
Yeah. That is odd. That is odd.
It's one of those weird quirks that you notice sometimes in the world and you're like, is this terrifying or am I the one that's just taking it the wrong way? And
that's
I don't know,
true.
I was just like, I
That's
want to
true.
ask someone that's a
That's
musician
true.
what their thoughts
But
are.
it might also just be like just kind of circumstances that they grew up in. I have this really close friend who likes to read, but we're always talking about how there was not a single book in the house she grew up in. It's like that to me is fucking crazy. Like how was and it's true. I've been to her house. She grew up in. There's not a single book in it. So maybe you grew up in a family that was far removed from music, and you just never.
I've been to some homes that don't have books in it, even today.
Yeah, well, I find that odd.
I
In the
do
same way
too.
that a house with no music would be odd. A sad kind of a house.
Yeah, I mean,
But-
the book thing is, so does she have an explanation why she loves to read so much, where she grew up in an environment that didn't really foster it?
No, she's my closest friend, and she's kind of a black sheep of her family. So
Is she a musician?
nothing about her makes sense. No.
You don't have to give any details about her, so that,
I know,
that you
no,
don't want to. Look, I can leave it as
No,
bland
it's
as
just
humanly
because
possible.
we're on this topic. What do you
Sure.
grow up with? No, she's just. I mean, I think reading in general is probably the best way to get better at thinking analytically and processing information. And I think anyone who's semi-intelligent is gonna want to pick up something and read it. Just curiosity,
Yeah, and
Why wouldn't you? Shit, it's like, it's kind of reading. Written words. Reading is kind of a strange, magical thing if you think about it. It's just a bunch of scratches on a piece of paper, and yet I read it and I imagine this fucking thing in my head, and then you read it and you imagine this completely other thing in your head. It's
and
a
how
beautiful
funny how
thing.
we all have our own unique narrators for when we are reading a book.
Yeah,
And,
totally different. It's a different movie playing in everyone's head, reading the same book. I love reading. I love reading. I love.
And I think reading in all of its forms are important.
But, huh?
I think reading in all of its forms are important.
Yeah.
I don't think just reading a book. I mean, I know so many people that get so much of their reading done, but they're doing it on a screen. But
Yeah, that's
they're
fine,
so
whatever.
very informed because they're
Though I do love
reading
the smell of a
Substacks
paper
and
book, but yes, doesn't matter.
I love the feeling of a newspaper back in the day.
Yeah?
I loved the feeling of a black and white paper newspaper, and you just sat there and read, just like read these obscure
That's
articles and
interesting.
stuff.
I've never read newspapers. I've never been into newspapers.
You know what it was for me, and I can kind of like pinpoint it. When I was growing up in this country, some of the TV shows you would watch, what you would notice in the framing of it, that the families that were more of the affluent representation, the father would always have the paper in the morning. He was always sitting there and reading with the paper. And when you are searching for father figures because of a lack of, then you start to kind of sometimes immortalize and fantasize about, well, if my dad was getting up for breakfast, he probably would read the paper because that's the type of family we are because we have books everywhere. You grandiose yourself a little bit more than you should.
Of course.
And then you get to a point where you're like, well, maybe I should start reading the damn paper and see what this feeling
then
is.
You start acting it out yourself.
Yeah, because like the families that were of the less affluent, let's say it was, a police officer, not honorable job, whatever it is, but it's a cop, or
Yeah,
it's a
yeah, for
firefighter,
sure.
or it's whatever it is, a nurse. They're not reading the paper in the morning.
Yeah.
And I guess somehow my subconscious picked up on this as a kid and was like, I want to be on that part. Because that house looks better, they're eating a better breakfast.
Sorry, did you not have your dad growing up?
No.
Okay.
My parents got divorced when I was less than a year old.
Okay.
And never met the guy really. Just
Okay.
kind of like, that was it.
So you had this vision of what
Yeah.
the father was supposed
Look, I
to
had
do.
my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, my mom's dad, he was always in my life, like raised me. But there's this huge age gap. He's your grandfather. So it's not the same. As much
No,
as the man
of course
gave it
not.
his best effort and was a father to me, in like I called him dad after a certain point because that's how close I was with him and consider him like the best male father figure I ever had. And again, it goes back to that. He did read the goddamn paper every day. He would get Aspares and Horizon and all these Armenian papers from like the Armenian market for the week.
Yes.
And he would read all of them. And then he would sit there with a pen and do the goddamn crossword because he'd never get it wrong.
Yep.
One of the funniest stories, and it's just like the funniest thing in the world to me because only my grandpa would have done this. So remember, I don't know if they had them in New York or in New Jersey, but the Mormons that would ride on the bicycles trying to, tell you about Mormonism and try to convert you.
Not really, no, okay.
So in California, and I'm sure it's all over the place, there was these young kids that would wear a
Proselytizing.
dress shirt and pants
Yes.
and
Yes.
and they would have bicycles and they would ride around trying to get you to convert to Mormonism.
Okay.
And it's part of like what they have to do to become
Yes,
an
yes.
adult Mormon.
I've seen the Book
whatever.
of Mormon, so
Yeah.
I'm getting the vibe.
So you're
Okay.
getting it.
Yeah.
I swear to God, I remember like it was yesterday. I'm sitting at home and I get a knock at the door by two Mormons.
Okay.
My 18-year-old dumbass assumption is, hey man, get the fuck out of here, bro. What are you talking about? And before I had the chance to close the door, they're like, wait, your grandpa asked us to come. I was like, bullshit. And then my grandpa comes out of the bedroom. He's like, hey boys, come on in.
Okay.
And I'm just sitting there going like, bro, you're not religious to begin with. Like,
Why
we
did you call
didn't like
them
we didn't grow up in a
Mormons?
religious
Okay.
house. There was spirituality and faith, but like we didn't go to church on Sundays. It was not
Okay.
not one of our things. And then like these guys came, sat down, talked for a half an hour, gave him an Armenian version of the Mormon book, like the entire thing. And when they left, I said, he's not gonna. He's like, we know he's not gonna convert, but he asked for the book, and we are happy to give him the book. We are never gonna bother you again. We understand. We just wanted to bring him the book. And they never came back again. And for
Wow.
me, it was just like, I asked him, like, what's up, man? Like, he's like, well, I read ours. I want to read theirs and see what
Wow.
what the whole fuss is about.
That's
He's like, I'm not
beautiful.
planning on, and he was just curious. Even in his
beautiful.
70s, the man was curious.
Wow.
And
That's
I
beautiful.
love that. If the one gift that he gave me was that I'm going to remain curious for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
'Cause
That's wonderful.
I think that's the only way you can continue to become
Yeah,
a better person is by being curious about the world.
for sure.
And I was like, it was just funny because like it came to my mind because we were just kind of like talking
That's
about.
beautiful.
So you've seen the Book of Mormon.
I've seen the book. Yeah.
You saw it live.
Yes. It's
I have not
ridiculous.
seen it.
It's a ridiculous show. See, it's hilarious.
It was the guys that did South Park, right?
I think so.
I
yeah.
think it
I
was
mean,
like-
it's like
part of them was from South
I'm
Park or something?
shocked that it's allowed to be on Broadway. But there's a lot of like pretty.
Is it still
racy-
on Broadway?
Yeah, it's still running. I mean, it's hilarious. It's just funny that it's like that the Mormons are cool with it.
Right.
Not that it's really dissing Mormonism, but it is. But it's, it's an interesting play. It's worth seeing for sure. Let me put it that way.
I get it. Okay, that makes sense. The Book
Yeah.
of Mormon. So you're telling me about your closest friend, and we were kind of like talking about, your musical life. So how does that work? I mean, you went to college for music, right?
I started college with music. I had a nice full scholarship, but then I changed my mind and got a degree in world history, which I never used that degree.
Can I ask why you changed your mind?
Because
how
I don't
far
believe
along did you change your
that would
mind?
be like too long a conversation, but I don't really believe in jazz education in the way that it's done now.
Okay.
I think the only way to really learn it is on the bandstand or, kind of studying. I don't know. I don't believe in it. It's kind of like you can't learn how to do this right where in an environment where everyone gets a trophy. If that's the attitude and if There
So
can't
you'd like
be,
it to be more like Whiplash, the movie?
I hate that movie.
Really?
I fucking hate that movie.
Why?
Because it's like one of those ridiculous.
Misrepresentations
Oh
of
my
what it
God,
looks
it's
like?
so corny and yes, misrepresented and kind of. Oh, I hate that movie. Watched it on a plane on a gig, and I was just like, nah, I can't continue watching this. Not that it has to be like tough love or whatever, but it's. Look, a university is a place where somebody paid a tuition and the professor's salary is paid out of that tuition. So the professor is kind of obligated to behave in a certain way because his salary depends on the number of students who are there. And so it creates a very false environment in which you can't be honest. And if you can't be honest with the way someone's playing, and I think, you know, with the way the social norms have changed to where people are so easily offended these days. And when what you're trying to learn is an emotional thing, because people have an emotional attachment with what they play, right? It's not like a mathematical equation where if you got it wrong, it's like, oh, you just, let me just correct the way, there's not a serious emotional attachment with the way you solved the problem.
Right.
When people play music, there's like some internal like connection and attachment to the work. So people don't like to be dissected and told what was right and wrong about it because they think that it's a personal attack. But unless you do that, there's no way to fix the mistakes and learn how to do it. And I don't think you can really do that in a university. And so, no, I don't think you should teach in a like aggressive way, but you have to teach in an honest way. You know, that's how I learned in New York, playing with people who I was afraid of and asking them what they thought needed to change. And even though, you know, most of the time hearing, not most of the time, all of the time, hearing somebody say like, yeah, you got to fix this and this wasn't good, that shit's like, that shit hurts. And you're like, okay. But you have to be the type of person who's like, okay, that hurts. I'm going to go home. I'm going to practice it. I'm going to fix it. And then I'm going to show him, you know. But unless you have that kind of approach, it's going to hurt too much and you're just going to walk away. And that's why New York has such a huge turnaround for jazz musicians, because there's a constant flow of newcomers that will, 95% of whom will leave within 2 years because it's like, it's too rough and they can't handle it and they just leave. So for someone to like, I think once you're over the 10-year cap, then you've kind of made it, or 5 years even, you know, most people don't last.
Well, I mean, it's survival of the fittest. I think that hurt is a requirement to actually see if you've got what it takes.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, I think these days
You're
people
right.
are less willing to deal with that. They're like, I don't want you to say anything. I'm just going to do this and pretend everything's fine. It's like, okay, well, then you sound like shit. I don't know what to tell you.
Because we went from a culture, at least from when I was growing up and probably when you were growing up, where it was like grit, determination, you know, you can do something with yourself. Because you're in this country, there's a chance, you know, you have the opportunity, just work your ass off and you'll be something. Now I feel like it's such a blame game culture.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
It's victimhood.
It's your
and
fault,
it's like,
and
what do you mean I'm not going to be, you know, I'm
Yeah.
starting in the band or I
Yes.
suck or any of that stuff.
Yeah, everybody gets a trophy approach.
And-
yeah, everyone's special. Everyone is. It's ridiculous, but it's where we're at. I don't know. Hopefully, like you were saying, the pendulum will swing back.
I think it is, and I see the swing in the pendulum, not necessarily in jazz, but I do see it in the comedy world. I'm a little bit more connected to that side of it because I just see a lot more stand-up comedy, and I see that, especially this year, comedians have begun to just give a big fuck you to all of that cancel
I've noticed
culture,
that too.
work,
Yes.
woke bullshit.
And
they're like,
to me,
listen,
that's been especially ridiculous in the world of comedy, because the entire point of comedy is to say the thing that's completely inappropriate and fucked up. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And you're saying I can't.
say the thing that people aren't
Yeah.
supposed to say because we can't say it. That was
Right.
the whole point of comedy. And
Right.
the whole idea was, and I don't remember the comic that said it, but it was very brilliant. They said, you know, I think it was Dave Chappelle. He's like, when we begin to make fun of you, you're not a minority anymore. You're part of the majority now. You're accepted. You're that means you are
A part of the
not
culture, a
being
part of the-
discriminated
yeah.
against, which means you can start to enjoy this and just like make fun of yourselves just
Yeah.
like we make fun of ourselves and everybody else.
Yes, yes.
And I think
agree.
it's so very smart.
Let's get out of this victim bullshit. I don't care whatever your walk of life is. Everybody's got their own things to deal with. That's fine. But like, do something about it.
Yes.
Lie about it. And I think you said it perfectly. It was the
Goddamn participation trophies and awards
Yeah,
and medals we started
it's too
handing
much.
out, and
It's too much.
I never was a fan of it. I was like, what do you mean everybody gets a medal? No, you
Yeah,
suck because you lost, and it should really hurt, but a percentage of you will get up tomorrow and work a lot harder.
Yeah,
Another percentage of you will
yeah.
quit,
Yeah.
and we need this in the world. We need to understand
For
who's
sure.
going to quit and who's going to keep going at a young age.
Yes.
This
yes.
needs to happen now because, hey, son, buddy, hey, maybe you weren't meant for basketball or jazz band, but you were meant for something so much
Right,
more brilliant.
right.
But if we keep fucking with you and saying, well, come on, Timmy, you've got this.
Yeah.
Timmy's fucked in 10 years.
Yeah.
And nobody's
I
holding
agree.
Timmy's hand. If he's in New York, Timmy's quitting. Timmy's fucked.
I know, I got you real scared about New York, but yeah.
Not even New York. Go anywhere.
Anywhere,
Go to
anywhere.
Dallas and try
Yeah,
to make
anywhere.
something of yourself. But if you're a Timmy, you're so screwed because this city will eat you up
Yeah.
and throw you out. We have a lot of respect for each other,
Yeah.
and we will not, step on anybody's toes for no reason. But if you're going to allow the world to take advantage of you, I'm sure there's enough people here that will take advantage of you and spit
sure.
you out because the world took advantage of them and they're just looking for their victim.
For sure.
It's okay.
For sure.
You make a choice. You want to be a victim
For
or you
sure.
want to do something about it.
I agree
And I
with
think
you.
that should be the way jazz music and a lot of musical genres or all the arts should operate in. Either you're good and deserve a chance and to
strictly
improve,
merit-based. Yeah,
or
I
you
agree.
suck, and someone should tell you this up front right now.
Yeah.
But then there's another thing to it that I really hate, which is, we talked about this, the capitalist part of it, where you fall into a certain minority group,
Mm-hmm.
and that minority group is the hot topic of the moment, and people think they can sell some shit with you. You might be
Yeah.
the hot topic for a minute, and then they will eat you up and throw you away when you're no
Yes,
longer
for
relevant.
Sure. I mean,
Which is worse,
that's
because
just
now you're
like
just
a
using
weird
people.
consequence of serious issues that we have. Obviously, I think this country has racial issues that it needs to address. There's a lot of problems.
I
But
disagree
think
with you.
I think oftentimes America has a Band-Aid solution for shit, which just doesn't work. Like, people don't want to actually deal with things, and they...
I think we talk more about being racist than we actually are racist. That's my honest opinion of this country. If we all just stopped the narrative for a minute, it really
This
doesn't.
is, again, another topic
it's not
that
the
would
same.
need like 3,000 hours to discuss. And also, the way I feel about it is, as far as Armenians go in America, we're like white. Go talk to a black person. And
I do. A lot of them in Dallas, and a lot of them have a great life. And a lot of Pakistanis and Indians. We live in the South, technically, and do you know how humongous our Muslim and Indian and other and Korean and populations are?
Yeah, I'm
and all of
noticing
them are
it's very
respected and all of
diverse
them are loved, and we can see each other at a shooting range and have a great time shooting guns without worrying about anything, and we'll see each other at restaurants, and we have an LGBTQIA plus community here that is
Yeah.
not discriminated against. They have their community. They are out and about just like anybody else is, and nobody says anything to them because that's what most of us are like. We're like, leave me alone, we will leave you alone.
Listen. To say
If on a
that there are
systemic
no
level you're
issues,
saying there's issues that need to be
yes,
solved, sure, but that doesn't make my country racist.
I think it does.
That makes the
but we
bureaucracy
can
of my
disagree.
country
We
racist, but
can
doesn't make my
disagree.
country
We
racist.
can disagree.
I know, that's the whole point of it's
in the
fun,
same
right?
way
To
that
have
I think
discourse.
Armenia is extremely sexist and et cetera, and 1,000 other things.
And I will not give you an
Unless-
opinion on that because I am too ignorant and too far detached from Armenia
Armenia
to
to-
say anything. So I don't think it would be correct for me to say we are or aren't because I just don't know enough. I would
Yeah.
love to learn why you think it is a sexist country, and I'm genuinely interested in that because I don't know enough about our country.
When's
I've
the
been.
last time you went back?
It's been about 3 or 4 years at this point. But
And
I
when
mean-
you go, do you guys stay a long time?
About a week.
Oh, okay. You go stay a long time. Well, I know you got 3 kids. It's
I
a
have
lot.
3 small kids,
That's a lot.
and
That's a lot.
as much as I love Armenia and as much as it is my country of birth, and
You feel like this is your country.
America is.
Yeah.
And I don't want anybody to feel hurt by that. I'm bilingual. I
I
speak
don't think
Armenian
there's
just as
anything wrong with
fluent. I
that.
speak English. My kids are spoken to in Armenian most of the time in our home, and we try to keep all of that going. But at some point, I had to come to terms with I am always going to be more American than I'm ever going to be Armenian.
Armenian.
And to not say that is a disservice to all the men and women that were born in that country and have continued to live in that country and maybe have immigrated to this country, but they've had so many more experiences that gives them much stronger roots and ties to that country.
You mean to Armenia?
To Armenia,
I
of
see.
course. Because I left there when I was 5. I barely have any recollections or memories to even say
Dude,
anything.
you don't at all have to like justify not feeling. There are often
I
times
feel
when
Armenian,
I
but
feel like
and
I'm
it's,
not
you know what I
Armenian.
mean? Like this country has given me more opportunity.
Yeah, of course.
And just looking at Armenia, I know I would have never had those opportunities. It doesn't exist for a person like me because I know
Yeah.
I'm the black sheep. I understand what I am, and I understand that it only works in a country that gives me freedom to fucking run my mouth.
Yeah.
You know what I
for
mean?
Sure,
Like
for sure.
there's the
It's
first,
funny because actually with your wife we were having this conversation kind of between what it's like to be in Armenia and to grow up in Armenia versus the U.S. But Armenia has a whole other set of things that it can give you that the U.S. can't, and vice versa. And it's just a matter of kind of people choosing what you want to take. And as of right now, I know a lot of Armenian friends, and my sister too just went back with a job for 3 years. A lot of people just moving back to Armenia, like Americans who've spent their entire lives in America. So it's just a matter of like what you're looking for, what you're buying. And if what Armenia's offering is what you're buying, then you're going to move there and not have all the things that America can offer you. And in a lot of ways, it's like not really worse or better to me. It just depends on what you're looking for.
Well, I mean, this conversation echoed the same way when we moved from California to Texas. And a lot of our friends and family were just like, what do you mean you're leaving California? Well, who leaves California? And I was like, no, I'm leaving California. Like, you guys just don't understand how bad it is now and way worse it's going to get. And it's never going to get better in my kids' formative years. The years that actually matter for my kids, this state is not getting any better. So how about I remove them from this environment? And if you guys get your shit together one day and my kids are post-college and want to move back to California, whoop-de-doo. Knock yourself out.
See, again, it depends on what you're looking
But
for.
there's
You
so
were
much.
looking for a specific thing for your kids at a specific time.
I was looking for a form of salvation from what I was seeing was going to engulf like
California.
a mind virus that is going to engulf California, and it is just beginning. And
Yeah.
people genuinely just don't understand because when things are good, you don't see the dirt. When things are okay, you barely notice the dirt. But once things get bad, everything comes to the surface. They're not bad
See,
yet.
again, I've never lived in California. I don't know.
They're just not there yet. They're not at their like lowest point. When
Yeah.
it gets there and full, look, Los Angeles has been burned down so many times that we've lost count at this point. And I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
Like, there's been riot
I've
after
heard,
riot
yeah,
after
yeah.
riot,
Yeah.
and it's just like, okay, the writing's on the wall, guys. You know, all you guys keep doing
Yeah.
is.
Again, it
But I
depends
think,
on what you're looking for, and
but I think this chapter of my life is not closed. I don't think I'm at a place where thinking of moving to Armenia is a viable option right now, because there's things greater than me that I need to
Yeah,
think
of
about.
course.
The kids, you know,
of
you get
course,
them
when
to
you
a
become
point.
parent, for sure.
Right, and
Yeah, I
you
was
know
saying
this, your
also that
priorities
I-
completely
even
change.
though I would like to, I actually would have preferred to raise my kid in Armenia, but I'm married to an American, and I can't do that.
That's just not, yeah.
I guess it's an unrealistic thing to be like, hey,
You want to move
we're moving
3,000
to
miles
this place
away?
that's like potentially going to get invaded by this other country. You cool with that? It's like, no.
That's the other
So-
thing, is like, that whole entire region of the world is in
It's
looming
unstable.
doom right now.
I know.
And it's like,
I know, but do you have any family back there?
I got
See,
nobody.
I have all my family's back there, and I think when you have family, it's like
I don't even have
shit,
extended family
everyone
over
I
there.
grew up with is raising their fucking kids. Like, am I what am I better than them? Where I have to have the safety, you know? It's like they're risking their children and their livelihood being in that place, and so I have kind of a closer attachment to it. And a part of me is like, if they're there, then I can be there too, and I can make it work too. Because
But there's got to
Armenia-
be a greater part of you that says I can't squander what my mom did. Because
Yes, of
that
course, I have
risk
the-
trumps
I have
all the other
immigrant
risks.
Complex. Yes, but there's also, you know, the very real threat to Armenia is that the less people there are in there, the more likely it is to get invaded. That's just the absolute the reality. And
But how?
what do you mean?
How is that a reality? How does that even make any sense? Your presence and your daughter's presence there, or your son's presence there, doesn't change an
Yes, it
invasion.
does.
I'll put it to you this way. Those that surround Armenia, even if you put 4 million extra people in Armenia tomorrow,
Yes, but
still have the
you-
manpower to
4
take
million
over
people
Armenia
are
tomorrow.
not just, no, I don't believe in that.
No, it's a guarantee.
No, because you're
We
strictly
don't have
thinking
any
about
strength.
those people as just numbers of people. When you get a larger group of people together, they
You're looking-
innovate.
are you
They
looking at Syria?
Are you looking at a place like Israel, tiny, but somehow has been able
Hold
to
on.
protect itself?
Are you kidding
Armenia
me?
needs to become,
Hang on.
militarily speaking,
It will
powerful
never
enough
become.
to protect itself.
It will never become.
Well,
Because
that's not the approach I have about Armenia.
let
It
me
needs
give you
to.
the
There's
numbers
no other
for it.
solution.
Let me give you the numbers
I don't
for it
wanna
that
get
actually
into
makes
politics.
sense.
I
Not
really
even
don't.
politics. It doesn't matter about politics. But for a Western country or the Western world,
Mm-hmm.
Israel is very much so needed. The entire West, NATO and the UN fund Israel. Israel on its own has no natural resources, has no way of, they are not innovating, and they can be innovating and all this stuff, but if countless hundreds of billions of dollars are not infused into their
My
economy,
man, Israel sells software that can like break down any country's government.
why
pretty
isn't,
much.
how many Israeli companies are trading on the NASDAQ?
I don't
Not
know.
many, but all of the American tech companies that are trading on the stock markets are the ones that are worth something on the global market. There isn't
Okay.
a big there's Israeli defense contractors that
Okay.
will sell software that'll break into all of our stuff.
Yeah.
That's great. That's not worth a lot.
I'm saying they have collectively. You're right. Yes, there's Western influence.
Guys,
there's
we-
Western support.
The West gave
I'm
them the
only
state of
using
Israel, but that's
as
the worst possible
I'm
one.
only using Israel as an example of a small country
Okay.
who has successfully defended itself, whether you
can I
like
give you
Israel or not.
can I give you another
and yes,
example?
it's backed up by the West, but Armenia can also
Good.
operate in such a way where it has partners that are willing to stand by its side, but also, and more importantly, can independently defend itself. And yes, having more people internally does play a big factor. If you look into border villages in Armenia, the borders are more likely to shift when there's no one left in our border villages. The less people you have, the more likely a place is to fall.
But
And
you're looking at war in a bygone context. I'm sorry to say this, but you're looking at it the wrong way because
No.
you don't need a lot of forces. All you need is strong weaponry, and you can literally annihilate the entire
there's
country
no,
in
let
24
me put it
hours.
this way.
We don't have an
There's
Iron
no
Dome.
drive to protect a village where nobody lives. Nobody gives a fuck about a place that nobody lives in. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That's why Artsakh fell, because Armenians have long been detached from Artsakh because we don't give a fuck about. We haven't given a fuck about Artsakh as long as Artsakh has existed. Okay, what I'm saying is there needs to be emotional and physical investment in the area that you're going to call your home, and the exodus out of Armenia has resulted in whatever we have today. That has played a giant part in it. I'm not blaming my family or your family or any family that left because they couldn't fucking put bread on the table. No, it's absurd. You had kids to feed and you had to do what you had to do. But that has played a part in us fucking losing the war and being beaten and being in the shitty situation we're in now. And a part of me does feel guilty, and a part of me does want to go back, and a part of me knows that every single Armenian who goes back helps in holding the country together. It does. I'll end on that note.
I think we just have a couple of different views on the world. I don't look at the world the same way most people do. I probably have a very crazy look at it.
No,
I
don't
think we need
it's crazy.
7
I've
countries.
heard many people say what you're saying, and
We just
I
need
see
7
where you're
countries in the
coming
world.
from.
That's it.
We what?
We need 7 countries in the world. That's it. We need to downsize into 7 countries worldwide, and
People
we
have
end
trouble
everything.
staying in large groups. People will always find reasons to bicker amongst each other, and civil war always breaks it up. I mean, look at the states. We can't even
No,
states
no.
can't even not argue with each other. It's like
It's fine, but we stay united. if you had 7 united
It's
countries in
looking
the
at me
world,
like-
we're going that path. Just
I mean,
like to-
maybe you're right.
because it ends all conflict. It just kind of ends all conflict. This is why you need 7, because you can't go to
it
war.
Doesn't. Look at the states. There's like so much.
We don't
discord
fight
within
with
the
each other,
states.
guys. We don't openly
it's
fight
kinda
with each
going
other.
in that direction,
Not at all. That was the bullshit that everybody started feeding each other about, like, oh my God, revolution and revolt and da da da. And I was sitting there
I'm
going,
not
like,
saying-
what the
I'm
fuck
not
are you
saying
guys
there's gonna be,
talking
like, a
about? We're just
civil war.
Americans. We're not
I'm
going to
not-
kill each other. We're not. That's not who we are. And I'm so. I will say
We
this
have
at the
different
top of my
ideas of America as
because I genuinely think my idea of America is at least the one that saves this country versus the other ideas that all they want to do is destroy this country. It's not perfect. Jesus Christ, it has so many problems. I promise you. I'm not saying we live in a utopia, but what is doing it better? Who has ever even made an attempt to do it better? And at least
a lot of other countries.
who?
Denmark.
How has Denmark done anything better than the United States? They don't even
Anyway,
have the
this
same.
is getting
They have
into
like 8
politics
people.
that I don't want to
I mean,
discuss. But
they're just a smaller country. Though. I mean, on like grand scale, think of it like humongous land territories
I don't
or
know,
amounts of
Germany?
people. Germans have 20 million people.
okay, you're saying this bigger country. Germany's doing it the way Denmark's doing it. It's a whole lot.
Because
bigger.
we're agreeing on the same point. When you have a lot of people together, they
It's harder
they
to-
bicker,
it's
right?
harder to operate. Yes,
Right.
I
Like the
agree.
Russians haven't been able to figure it
Russia
out.
is
You know what I
fucked
mean?
up.
Like they keep failing and
Yes,
over
but
and
you
over
can't
again.
constantly blame that on the size. It's like you can't have operational problems. It's
We're gonna have. I agree with you completely on that. Like we're always gonna have issues, but I genuinely have so much hope and optimism for our country, and I
Are
just
you talking about Armenia?
no
So, like,
America. I have hope and optimism for America because there's so.
We differ there, my friend.
I don't know what to think about Armenia because the problem with Armenia is it doesn't have. It doesn't have the ability to make its own decisions right now because there's so many bigger players that are trying to influence it.
right.
Iran, Russia, Turkey, the United States, France, whoever it is, someone has always got Armenia's ear and is trying to attract them to some sort of pact or agreement or something. And every single time we seem to get screwed over by by the new voice in our ear, and it's disheartening. But I look at it and I'm like, what other choice are we left with? Because we're such a tiny little blip surrounded by so many enemies and so many larger nations that may or may not actually care about our existence. It's just one, it's like we're stuck in a rock and a hard place, and I don't know. I want to have optimism for Armenia, but I don't know where to find it because
That's
everybody
funny
else
because
is so hard.
You and I feel like the rivers.
Yeah, we're
for the
the
US
polar
and
opposites.
Armenia. Yeah, because I don't see the future of America being very bright, and you don't see the future of Armenia being very bright. But I see it as the complete opposite.
It hurts.
I see a
I
dark
mean, it hurts that
future
I don't
for the
see
US,
it.
and I see a bright future for Armenia. I do.
And there's always a possibility that neither of us are right, and neither of those realities come true, and
It's
just things
true.
just continue down the same kind of path
Yes,
that they've
yeah,
been, and it's just like nothing
absolutely. You never
changes.
know, you never
Sometimes
know.
that happens too. Things just don't change. You're like, oh, okay.
It is, yeah, it is the way it is.
You never know.
Anything
It is
can
what it
happen.
is. So I think we had a cool conversation. We touched upon a
did. We
bunch of
talked
fun
about a lot of
stuff.
things.
Yeah, that's why I love doing podcasts with people, is because
Yeah,
we
it
just get
leads
to
you to
talk
weird
about stuff.
places,
Yeah.
yeah.
And like we'll have another conversation at a later date. It'll be fun. Maybe we'll be in New York and we can just stop
Yeah,
by
yeah,
and have
please
another
do.
chat. Let people know where they can find you. This series is going to come out sometime in January-ish.
Okay.
For the Notable Armenians, you're the debut episode of it, so you'll be
Okay.
number one. Just
People
social
can
media
find
stuff.
my calendar on lucyjazznyc.com. Otherwise, social media is Lucy Yeghiazaryan, the worst business last name ever. Yeghiazaryan. But Lucy Jazz NYC is the best way to find me.
I'm
And
sure it's got the links
I'm
to your
on all
Instagram and stuff.
platforms, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple, whatever you use to listen to music, I'm on there.
And from lucyjazznyc.com, they can
Yes.
find all the links to your
Yes.
music and
Yes.
go through your discography
Yep,
and all that
yep,
good stuff.
yep.
Awesome. And you just dropped a new album. What's the name of it?
I did. It's called Beside the Golden Door, Voske Dranchemin, and it's a pairing of Armenian songs with jazz standards.
Will you leave us with just letting us know what was the idea for the name?
Yeah. Beside
it's a
the
beautiful
Golden
name.
Door is the last line from the poem that's written on the Statue of Liberty.
Wow.
And the album is pairings of jazz standards with Armenian folk songs, but they're all thematically matching. So, for example, like Khamzori Tsari Takin with Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree, or Lover Come Back with Yetari Tarlanas, or they're all like about the same thing. So it's kind of a way for me to present Armenian music to non-Armenian audiences. And I took the name of the album from the poem on the Statue of Liberty, because I think as an immigrant, you oftentimes get to that proverbial door, that golden door, and I don't know about you, but I was very desperate as a teenager to walk through that door and become American finally. But as time passes, you kind of realize that you'll never fully walk through that door, and you're never fully Armenian, and you're never fully American. And so you're kind of beside this door. And even though initially that's kind of a depressing feeling, later on, you're like at peace with it, and you're at peace with the fact that you are both. And I think being both is being American, because we're a country of immigrants.
I had a very similar thought, and it was that I will always be a guest in this country.
Yes.
My children will be renters in this country. Their children will be owners.
That's an interesting way to think about it.
That's kind of the way I look at it. It's
Yeah.
like, I will be a guest, they will rent, they will own.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So like, yeah,
They'll go through that door at last, perhaps.
perhaps they will
Yeah.
go through that door. Hopefully that door will still be there.
Yeah.
Let's
hopefully.
hope, right?
Don't get dark with me. It's all good.
No. I completely understand. Lucy, thank you so very much for
course,
doing
it was
this.
a pleasure.
An absolute pleasure. What a fun
You too.
conversation.
You too.
Thank you again.